Hi, everybody, and welcome to ThunderStream and Literature Out Loud. I'm so glad you could join us, and I'm so glad that we get to have two beautiful readers from Denver, Colorado, Kenya Fashaw and Tessa Nelson, both of them talented beyond belief. And we've got words that are being featured in the Aspen Words Winter Festival. And they're coming up. I mean, I've been reading some stuff from Anthony Doerr, who was featured on November 3rd, and reading some other stuff. But we have some things by Michelle Zahner, who is featured on February 15th with a couple of other people that are doing memoir writing for Aspen Words, and Richard Powers, who is being featured on March 29th. Both of them just unbelievably talented writers. And I can't tell you how glad we are to be presenting them being read by really, really good readers. Don't say I didn't tell you, they're really good. Okay, now the first reader we have coming is Tessa Nelson. And let me read a little bit about what Richard Powers said about this piece that she's going to be reading. He says, I wrote To the Measure's Fall as my contribution for a course I taught at Stanford in early 2010. I asked a small group of spectacular students to write a work that in some way blurred the boundaries between fiction and nonfiction. They all put themselves on the line with their creations, so I figured I should as well. And he did. And so this piece is going to feature Tessa as long as she can hold out against the mystery voice, which will also be featured in this piece. And Kenya, I'll be introducing you right after Tessa finishes hers. So enjoy. Everybody listen up. This is good stuff. I'm not kidding.
To the Measure's Fall by Richard Powers from The New Yorker. First read through. You are biking through the Cotswolds when you come across the thing. Spring of 63, 21 years old, in your junior year abroad at the University of York, after a spring term green with Chaucer, Milton, Byron, and Swinburne. Remember Swinburne? Year one of a life newly devoted to words. Your recent change, of course, has crushed your father. He long hoped that you would follow through on that Kennedy-inspired dream of community service. You, who might have become a first-rate social worker. You, who might have done good things for the species, or at least for the old neighborhood. But life will be books for you. From here on, nothing has ever felt more preordained. Term's out, and it's time to see every square mile on this island. Bicycle clips, a blue guide, a transistor radio, and skin-hugging rain. Villages slip past on valley roads as twisty as the clauses in Henry James. The book turns up in a junk shop in an old Saxon market town whose name you will remember as almost certainly having an M in it. Among the rusted baby buggies and ancient radios, you find old cooking magazines, books on fly tying and photography, late 50s spy novels with cardboard covers worn as soft as felt. The thing pops out to you. To the Measure's Fall by someone named Elton Wentworth. There's nothing else like it in the shop. It's a fat tome with rough-cut pages and a deluxe tooled binding. The dust jacket has disappeared, but the front matter suggests that you know about all about Mr. Wentworth already. Born in 1888, the author of 12 previous books and the winner of awards too numerous to mention. The first line reads, a freak snow hit late that year, 2 weeks after the sand martins returned to the gravel pits near the South Downs. The next few paragraphs sketch out a hard-pressed town, Wotan-on-Wold, much like the one you're in, with the M in it. On page 3, the author reveals the date, 1913. On the last page, a village search party finds the body of a young amputee captain who served at the Somme, laying at the bottom of said gravel pits. Only 7 years have passed, but the lilting opening cadences have darkened into fragments from another world. The book seems to be a sweeping portrait of rural England before and after the First World War. You check the title page. Copyright 1948. Aside from 2 bold exclamation points at the end of chapter 1, the pages are unblemished, perhaps unread. Penciled into the upper right hand of the inside front is the price: £10, 6 pence. Exorbitant. You draw £7 a week for student expenses. A 3-course Chinese dinner at Station Road costs 4 shillings, and lunch in the canteen is half that. A 12-inch LP runs only £1, and even a 2-minute call to the States is cheaper than Mr. Wentworth's book. Half a guinea for a used novel you've never heard of? Robbery. But something about that opening is too strange for you to resist. Besides, you've just devoted your life to literature. You graze the start of chapter 2, in which Trevor, a spindly farmer's son with Addison's disease, baffles his parents by insisting on going to university. You need to know how this beginning can reach so macabre an end. The shop's owner is a beaked old man with a gray hairline like a cowl slipping off his head. It's humiliating to bargain with him, but you're desperate.
How much do you offer the junk store owner for his used book?
You are, by the way, female. Lots of folks think you shouldn't be out biking alone, even in the Cotswolds. See pages 214 to 223 of Mr. Wentworth's epic.
How much would you have offered for the book had you been male?
You buy the book, lug it around on the rest of your bike tour, drag it back up north with you, but somehow fail to read it. When summer ends, and with it your English idle, you're shocked to discover how many essential novels you've bought and haven't gotten around to reading. Now the problem is packing them all into a suitcase that is lighter than 44 pounds. You could mail them to the States, but they'd cost more to ship than you spent to buy them. You resort to the time-honored system of 3 piles. Keep for all time, suspend in purgatory, cast forever into the outer darkness. By the evening, before the homeward flight, To the Measure's Fall is stuck stubbornly in purgatory, along with Wheelock's What is Poetry, James Purdy's Malcolm, The Bull from the Sea, and Mary Renault, John Brain's bestseller, Life at the Top, and Updike's The Centaur, which has got mixed reviews. Life at the Top might be tricky to get hold of in the States. Who knows how long Updike will be read? Malcolm, on the other hand, is already on every undergraduate syllabus in the country. Renault, Guilty Pleasure, is the one you'd really love to have in your carry-on. The further adventures of Theseus and Hippolyta with sun-drenched temples, earthquakes, and human god miscegenation. How better to fill 8 hours of captive reading? But your bag will only hold 4 more volumes.
Choose which 2 books get dumped forever.
Wentworth makes the cut, if only as a souvenir of that magical cycling tour. Weirdly, browsing through the bookshop in the Oceanic Terminal at Heathrow, you notice a reprint of one of his earlier novels about coal miners in Wales. It's a penguin with that orange spine that's synonymous with great books. There's a jacket blurb from Winston Churchill calling Wentworth "this island's Balzac," our much revered, much imitated national asset. And another from Dame Edith Sitwell, DBE, calling him England's most distinguished living author of the novel of community. National asset makes Wentworth sound like a hulking stone country house given away by pauperized aristocrats for tax deductions, and most distinguished feels a bit dated against the backdrop of mods, rockers, and angry young men, and beyond the fringe. Still, 2 immortal literary lions have praised this man to the skies. What an incredible deal, getting that first edition for 8 shillings. Clearly, the balding junk shop owner didn't know what he was selling. For out over the Atlantic, as you approach Greenland, a twinge of conscience hits you. What good is all the cultivation in the world if you use it to cheat ignorant people?
How much should you have paid the shopkeeper? Exceed his proposed price if necessary.
Back in the States, you look up Elton Wentworth. He isn't England's most distinguished living anything. He died right around the time you realized you'd sooner sell cigarettes from a shoulder tray than go into social work. In addition to sheep in the Cotswolds and coal in Wales, he did Lincolnshire fishermen and 3 generations of broomy factory workers. He wasn't England's Balzac. He was the James Michener of the Midlands. You read the first 100 pages of To the Measure's Fall, hacking your way through thickets of dialect. The prose can be brutally beautiful. But the semester starts, you fall in love, get deflowered, watch Kennedy die and the Beatles invade, Get high to listen to Coltrane and discover Heller, Ellison, Ferlinghetti, and Bellow. Writing that flows across the page in huge, bright swaths that you didn't know English could permit. So the First World War was a bad scene. Aren't we over that yet? And what was Wentworth doing, bringing out a book wrapped in Edwardian nostalgia 3 years after Dachau? You graduate in the spring and pack up your worldly possessions again, just as the USS Maddox fires on 3 patrol boats in the Gulf of Tonkin, letting Johnson widen a war in a country that, until recently, was as fictional to you as Wentworth's South Downs.
Does the book go to Goodwill, the Salvation Army, or the 25-cent pile at your graduation lawn sale?
You survive 2 years of graduate classes. The general comprehensive text, flubbing the question on Tobias Smollett, marriage to a Faulkner guy, and a grueling 400-page book special field exam on the Electra complex in post-war American prose, a subject that you begin to hate long before your committee can lob the first question. All the while, there's Biafra, Black Power, and the levitation of the Pentagon. My Lai, back-to-back assassinations, the siege of Chicago, street warfare, and city centers burning in an annual summer ritual. Drugs are everywhere, making people see God or murder their families. Books go surreal, psychedelic, and sometimes you wonder whether they're causing the mayhem or just profiting from it. The dissertation, your baggy monster, becomes a 4-year excuse to read everything except those writers you threaten to write about. On a hot June Thursday, early in the new decade, right around the time when 5 men break into the DNC headquarters in D.C., you find yourself patrolling your own shelves, like a hopeful bidder at an estate scale. It's a shock to come across that deluxe binding, which you distinctly remember throwing out a long time ago. The Cotswolds, cruel joke, Elgarian imperial residue. You take it down and browse. You stop to fix dinner for your husband, too. An invalid of high modernism cannot fix it for himself. But you're back at Wentworth until 4 a.m. When you end up at the bottom of the South Downs gravel pit, 1920, your throat feeling as if you had been taking swabs at it with a pipe cleaner. You don't know what hurts more, the swirling moral turbulence of the book or the belated discovery that everything you thought about it was wrong. You missed it all. Register, mood, irony, ambiguity, subtleties of characterization, narrative arc, even basic plot points. You can't read. It's like finding out at 30 that you're adopted. You're not yet sure that it's great literature, but the thing took you underwater and held you there for the better part of 13 hours, and 2 days later you're still winded. Its single history-slapped village is a whole world whose heft and weight in strange, sinuous tangle of syntax stands for nothing but itself. Its portraits, particularly that of Sarah, the mother of doomed Captain Trevor and the furtive wife of idealism-scarred Francis Beck, seem so clearly ripped from the microscopic observation that it's cheating to call them fiction. The story is not your life. It's not your time or place. It's just a scrap of torn diary floating up from a scorched past. What does the thing want from you?
Give the book a final grade. Fail, low pass, pass, pass with honors, highest distinction.
You make your husband read it. You do the Lysistrata thing until he does. This is a mistake as he reads it way too fast. Very well done, he reports, wanting his sugar cube. Skillful. First-rate social realism. Why haven't more people written about this guy? It isn't skillful. It isn't social realism. You read it again, taking a week this time. Now the book gets more troubling, more weirdly allegorical. You can't put your finger on what bothers you. Something to do with hoping against your better judgment. You lie awake on a hot August night, wondering how a thing might be good and real and true for a while, then made irrelevant or worse by later events. You've got very close with your thesis advisor. In fact, if you remember right, you're sleeping with him. The two of you are in an actual bed somewhere in the dark, a luxury you can no longer imagine how you managed. Maybe it's an OPEC, oil crisis thing. Turn off the lights when not in use. The two of you are playing that old favorite, which classic you would never dare admit to anyone but your lover in the dark that you haven't read. You offer Silas Lapham, and he ups the ante to Billy Budd. You try to trump with The Sound and the Fury, which he blows out of the water with Huck Finn. You ask him if he's ever read any Wentworth. He just snickers, thinking it's another game. You obsess about the thing. You read all the criticism. Most of it damns itself with due diligence. Trevor Beck and Erickson's theory of psychosocial development. Wool, surplus value and class unrest in Wentworth's Wotan on Wold. No article has an insight strong enough to explain why you should be reading it rather than the book again. You learn all things about Elton Wentworth, some of which you wish you hadn't. Blacklisted for pacifist activity under the Defense of the Realm Act. Went to Russia between the wars and came back extolling the enlightened social state. Right up until Munich, a prominent appeaser. But come September 1939, he turned British super patriot and a personal propagandizer for Churchill, which helps explain the latter's jacket blurb. After the war, he fought decolonization tooth and nail in a series of interviews with dozens of natives on 3 continents who all declared the British Empire to be the best thing to ever happen to its colonized subjects. At the age of 81, he was jailed for 3 months for participating in violent demonstrations against nuclear weapons. In short, the author of that autonomous, ungrudging, and unjudging book with no villains and fewer heroes, in which every moral position is plausible but flawed, was himself a hopeless, card-carrying, repeat-offending true believer.
Grade Elton Wentworth's public performance. Separate marks for form, style, and intent.
In one of the Wentworth biographies, you come across a photograph of a note to Wentworth from Sir Winston himself. The letter's signature vaguely resembles the inked scrawl that you've never paid attention to on the inside front cover of your copy. Underneath the penciled price that now fills you with shame. The signature in the reproduced note reads, Winnie. The drooping, obscured squiggle in your copy looks more like Hump Hump Clonlutch. You're insane, of course, hallucinating from over-research. There's no way on likely Earth that a book belonging to one of the century's most famous personages could end up in a junk shop in the Cotswolds. Winston Churchill, Nobel laureate in literature, wasn't about to write his name in his bloody books. If found, please return to the House of Commons, London. You try to erase the penciled price for a better look, but you succeed only in smearing the signature. You look up every occurrence of Churchill's signature on record in the university's library. There is a similarity. The book gives you nothing else to go on, except the 2 bold exclamation points at the end of the first chapter. The one on the right seems distinctly Churchillian. You take the book to an appraiser, but you get paranoid. This is exactly the kind of scenario in which the naive get bilked. On your next trip to the city, you show it to an antiquarian from whom you've bought many times. He listens to your theory with a tight, embarrassed smile. He says that even if you did get the signature certified, which would cost considerable blood, toil, tears, and sweat, the simple signature without any further marginalia might not greatly increase the book's value. Given the dicey nature of the scribble, you may not want to pay for appraisal, but he's willing to give you $50 for the copy for a good customer. $50 could buy 2 years of used novels.
Deal or no deal?
You keep the copy. For reasons that reason doesn't understand. But 2.5 months later, you wipe out on literature altogether. You're out of time in the graduate program and still no dis. Your husband says no kids until you finish, but you can't finish. The thesis isn't even embarrassing. Psychoanalytical readings reek of 6 years ago, and this new post-structural stuff gives you hives. You crash and burn. The house goes to pot. You glue yourself to the Watergate hearings for weeks. The whole mad circus is like a Dickens serial saga. You talk to the screen, cheering and hissing. You even develop a little thing for Sam Irvin. You get a job adjuncting at a nearby college. Intros and surveys, but drumming up enthusiasm for Wharton and Cather is murder. These days it's all Pynchon and Barthelme, Coover and Gaddis and Gas. The cannon goes up in smoke. You realize belatedly that you're a co-opted, false consciousness servant of empire, a capo of privileged, heteronormative white paternalism. But it's too late to retool. Around the fall of Saigon, plagued by those films of people on the embassy rooftop clutching the runners of escaping helicopters, you bail out into law school. It's the only practical choice. And doesn't law, at bottom, involve the same act of eternal verbal negotiation as reading? The marriage breaks up under the pressure of 1L. Your only recreational reading for the next 2 years is the congressional record. You get a good job with a decent boutique firm specializing in intellectual property. None of your dozens of bright, well-read colleagues have ever heard of Wotan on Wold. You marry again, this time for real, to a big police procedural fan in corporate litigation. At the last possible moment, you have kids. 3 of them. 1 reader and 2 watchers who get their ABCs from purple and green televised puppets. Nothing will ever light up the cortex faster than cathode rays. Yet, with your reader daughter, the whole awful, gut-wrenching seduction happens all over again. Urban ducklings, wild things, purple crayons, it doesn't matter. Your daughter glazed eyes and body snatch chants, "Read, mommy, read!" Like she's off in Neverland already, even before the first verb. And you, fallen Wendy, eviscerated by the eternal recurrence of it all, hear Peter snarl at you for growing guilty and big and old, while something inside you cries, "Woman! Woman, let go of me!" A few years pass and still your daughter is reading furiously. You'll lose her eventually to the rising flood of film, the swelling archive of video that offers whole new republics of visual democracy. Who knows how long the page will hold her attention? Do you rush her into the good stuff while you can? Maybe, if you time things right, the whole crumbling Edwardian stage set in Wotan on Wold will strike her as some kind of hyper-Narnia.
When should you push Wentworth on Jane? 1, never too early. 2, never too late. 3, never gonna happen.
Your children become the heroes of their own plots. Time-worn narratives and unrecognizable new bindings. The 80s pass while your energies are spent elsewhere, on building up the college tuition war chests, on making partner, on helping companies copyright common English words. You still read for pleasure, all kinds of things. The hunger remains, but as with sex, the costumes must grow ever more elaborate to produce the same transport. You're caught somewhere between reading for recognition and reading for estrangement. Mostly what you read are reviews. Too few hours left to do more than scan the books you know you'd love. At least you can read what the gatekeepers say about this fall's lineup, and often imagining a book from its synopsis beats what you do manage to slog through. The reviews accumulate faster than you can flip through them. What you really need is a thumbnail summary of the thumbnail summaries. A year or so after Granada or Iran-Contra or some such thing, while blasting through last year's stack of unread literary weeklies prior to pitching them, you come across the fact that To the Measure's Fall, long out of print, is being reissued in an annotated essential library edition. Part of the general renaissance of Wentworth, who, the review laments, has been in a 20-year decline. The reviewer calls Measures the once celebrated, now forgotten British Magic Mountain. He claims that Wentworth's wartime Midlands still have as much to reveal as any of the marginalized regions of the world. Can that possibly include Lesotho, Lebanon, and the Punjab? The retrospective appreciation feels like one of those lifetime achievement awards that you get for having the courtesy to stay dead. The new cover for the Essential Library edition is dazzling. Makes Wentworth look like the new Alice Walker. You're not sure what constitutes a decent interval between much revered national asset and unfairly undervalued. For the reviewer, the revival proves the one universal truth about literary merit. Quality will surface in the run of time. The trick is to stop time at just the right moment.
Who is Elton Wentworth exactly? Choose one. 1. The currently most unjustly underrated author of his generation. 2. The formerly most justly overrated author of his generation. 3. The soon-to-be least unjustly re-rated author of his generation.
New annotated editions flood the market. Does your boat go up? You break down and pay an appraiser 10 times what you would have 10 years ago to look at your copy. Churchill's marked up volume, it turns out, went for £800 at Sotheby's, just as the new Wentworth Renaissance hit. Your copy belonged to a Cotswold sheep farmer named H.H. Cleanleach. The appraiser offers you $10 off his fee. The boys in information processing install a terminal in your office that fulfills your old dream: rapid access to abstracts of all the articles that you can no longer find time to read. In between researching briefs, you follow the boomlet in Wentworth studies. The reader response people take him up, then those who study reputational revision. There's a minor heyday in swarming any author still in the state of pre-post exhaustion, just before the idea of single author studies gives out. A modernist at New Mexico State proves that To the Measure's Fall was really written around 1928, suppressed by Wentworth for 2 decades, then published despite his objections in a form he didn't want. A Barnard associate professor proves that half the novel was the work of Wentworth's longtime mistress. A graduate student at Indiana proves that the book is riddled with historical error. Scholars of all ranks show how Wentworth was the product of 1,000 horrific cultural blindnesses and Eurocentric brutalities.
Write a brief letter to no one about what you once thought the book might mean.
The Berlin Wall falls, and the evil empire falls with it. The Cold War ends, and for a moment, history does too. You stop reading anything that is more than 2 months old. You don't exactly remember the 90s. The Gulf, of course, something about Somalia and Sarajevo, smoke everywhere, lots of colored ribbons tied around America's trees. The firm keeps dangling the promise of senior partnership, but it never quite happens. The 1993 feature film adaptation of To the Measure's Fall stars Daniel Day-Lewis and Emma Thompson. There's an extended hallucinatory sequence depicting the suicidal slow walk at the Somme, filmed in Scotland, graphically matched to a torrid sex scene on the heath inside Wotan-on-Wold, filmed in a Hollywood sound studio. A tie-in paperback edition appears with a glossy movie still cover featuring the gorgeous leads.
Rate the film. 1. Worth the price of a movie ticket. 2. Worth videotaping when it comes on TV. 3. Worth denouncing at a dinner party. 4. Worth a class action suit by readers everywhere.
On your 55th birthday, the age at which the terminally ill Sarah Beck must identify her son's body at the foot of the South Downs gravel pit, you join a book group. The kids are grown, the career's on autopilot, the husband is off playing paintball, and it's time to read again. Books are back in more flavors than ever. Cool books, slick books, innovative remixes, massive doorstops, funny jeu d'esprit, weepy Uyghur Bildungsromans, caustic family sagas from Kazakhstan, books in every market niche and biome. Avant, après, post, retro. Back too is the long dead art of communal reading. Okay, maybe a few of your book group members are in it for the finger food, but you'd forgotten what a pleasure it is to discuss out loud. Aimless talk about love and lust, responsibility, hope, and pain. Together over 2 years, you read the major national selections. Your fellow members bring their old secret freight out of deep storage. You take 9 months to work up to your request. You're unsure of your friends, unsure of your ability to reread, unsure of just what's in that treacherous book these days. Read it slowly this time. A chapter a night over the course of weeks. This time, though, the book is no more than a grand, futile gesture of nevertheless in the face of human frailty. Francis Beck's refusal to believe that his wife is ill. A feckless cowardice that turns by insistence almost heroic. Alice Wright's paralyzing premonition, which she can't act upon without destroying the man who would destroy her. Trevor's premeditated signal to Alice, ready to launch itself from beyond the grave. 2 club members report flinging the book across the room in a rage. Another demands her 3 days back. Accusations multiply. It's mawkish, it's cerebral, it's meandering, it's manipulative, it's cold and cunning and misanthropic. It's wrecked by redemption. How are we supposed to care about these characters? I just wanted them all to get a life. But a few people in the group don't know what hit them. One friend hated the first 50 pages but wanted 50 more after the end. Quietest man in the group comes back from Wotan on Wold, wrapped in brittle bewilderment at his own existence. It's a custom of the group, introduced by the male minority, to assign every book a letter grade. Yours gets a C+.
What percentage of your pleasure has gone out of the book forever? Fractions permitted.
Overnight, the World Wide Web weaves tightly around you. A novelty at first, then invaluable, then life support, then heroin. It's a chance to recapture everything that you've ever lost. College friends, out-of-print rarities, quotations that had vanished forever. Your online hours must come from somewhere, and it isn't from your TV viewing. You lose whole days on the roller coaster of real-time eBay auctions. Volumes of Wentworth go off at every price, from triple digits down to $1.99. You rescue a few to give to friends someday or whenever. It thrills you to discover a site where all the shameless, recidivist Wentworth readers in the world gather to post their guilty pleasures. You subscribe to a feed. 6 months later, the community spirals into civil war as a thread between sock puppets and anonymous avatars goes up in flames. You watch the Amazon ratings for To the Measure's Fall drop steadily, from a high of 4.5 stars to a low somewhere below that of a defective wood chipper. The wisdom of crowds means to send Wentworth into a third and final eclipse. You consider logging in at Comfort Suites all across the country, creating all kinds of personae to rescue the book for another generation of Wentworth readers whenever they dare to come out of hiding.
How many aliases do you create to rate the book? 1. Just enough to boost the book back to its rightful rating. 2. Sarah Beck would never create an alias.
Then the new century. Terror and sci-fi become life's dominant genres. War turns perpetual. The last print newspapers head towards extinction. More words get posted in 5 years than were published in all previous history. Global warming threatens to flood coasts inhabited by 500 million people. Most of the planet suffers from drought or tainted water.
Name the book that best captures life as now lived.
2 months before you plan to retire, you learn that you have a massive hilar tumor nestled up in the stem of your lungs where nothing can reach it. It's right where Sarah Beck's is, if you're imagining correctly. Your daughter, the reader, brings you the book to keep you company in the state-of-the-art cancer center in your bed next to the window that looks out onto a brick wall 10 feet across a cement courtyard. You read it again. Not the whole book, of course. You couldn't possibly read a whole anything, but you manage a few pages, searching for a creature that recedes in front of your gaze. This time, the book is about the shifting delusion of shared need, our imprisonment in a medium as traceless as air. It's about a girl who knew nothing at all, taking a bike ride through the Cotswolds one ridiculous spring, mistaking books for life and those roiling hills of metaphor for truth. It's about a little flash, glimpsed for half a paragraph at the bottom of the left-hand page, that fills you with something almost like knowing. A freak snow hits late that year. You lie in bed, an hour from your next morphine dose, your swollen index finger marking a secret place in the spine-cracked volume, the passage that predicted your life. For a moment, you are lucid and equal to any story.
Score the world on a scale from 1 to 10. Say what you'd like to see happen in the sequel.
Well, I must say that Richard Powers, he lived up to the task that he set for his students. They all put themselves on the line with their creations, so I figured I should as well. Tessa and Mystery Voice, thank you very much. That's lovely. And
Hi.
thank you, Topher. And we can look forward to, with Aspen Words, seeing more from Richard Powers on March 29th. But that brings us to a completely different thing, which is what Kenya Fashaw is going to read for us tonight, which is a beautiful memoir from Eleanor Henderson, who is a memoir writer. And she has put together a book of birth memories by female authors, which is titled Labor Day. And her own memoir is featured in this book. And it's a lovely thing. And I hope you enjoy it, read by a beautiful, beautiful reader. And it's entitled Two Lines. Please, Kenya, would you please?
Thank you. Two Lines by Eleanor Henderson. My mother had been declared infertile. A blocked fallopian tube was to blame. After 3 years of trying to get pregnant, she and my father adopted a son. Then, to her surprise, 3 years later, she became pregnant with another. She may have had one blocked tube, but that other seemed to function just fine. She did the math, counting the odd months when she would ovulate from the clear tube. 3 more years later, while living in Greece with my father and 2 little boys, she got pregnant with me. She had outwitted the doctor's diagnosis. She had detected the key to her own fickle body. When my husband, Aaron, and I had been together 10 years and we were ready to try to conceive, I felt in my bones that the odds were against us. Luck would render me infertile, if not my genes. I sat on my toilet, inspecting my underwear for signs of infertility, watching for a sign: the telltale cervical mucus of ovulation, the blood of menstruation, or could it be implantation? Inside my body was a biological process beyond my control, a system as concealed and perplexing as modern plumbing. So when a few months into my quest to get pregnant, I underwent an HSG, the same procedure that revealed my mother's infertility. I felt as though I were visiting a palm reader. I lay on my back while a doctor fitted me with a catheter and injected me with blue dye. On the x-ray, it flushed through my uterus like a squid's ink cloud. Then it burst victoriously through my fallopian tubes. They were open. The plumbing was working. Then a couple of months later, I went to my internets with sharp abdominal cramps. All the baby-making sex we'd been having had become uncomfortable and then painful. Could I have endometriosis? I asked her. I hadn't heard of the disease before, but I'd done some research online and the symptoms rang true. What does it feel like? She said. I couldn't say. It feels like the tissue from the lining of my uterus is growing in other parts of my abdomen. I didn't know what that felt like, I said. It feels like gas. Then it's probably gas, she said. Months passed and the cramps came and went, and I still couldn't get pregnant despite our well-timed and often excruciating efforts. My tubes were open. So what was the problem? And then there were my periods, which had become cascades of pain. For days at a time, I ached in my belly, in my back of my knees. The blood coursing through me ached. Then one day, paging through Tony Weschler's classic, Taking Charge of Your Fertility, I took a break from studying the close-ups of egg white cervical mucus between 2 manicured fingers and came across another, more detailed description of endometriosis. I dismissed the possibility of the disease, taking the doctor's word. But the symptoms shot off the page. For all my careful monitoring of my underwear, I hadn't made a connection between my abdominal cramps, my menstruation pain, and my inability to conceive. The internist referred me to an OB. And on a morning that happened to coincide with the first hours of my period, adding injury to insult, a nurse fit a giant condom over an ultrasound wand and probed me with it, searching deep inside for ovarian cysts or some other cause of my pain, which had abruptly become intergalactic. Aaron and I had been trying at this point for 8 months. No cysts, said the OB afterward. I think I have endometriosis, I told her. I think so too, she said. Her name was Jennifer. She was blonde and I loved her. A few weeks later, Aaron and my mother accompanied me to the hospital where I underwent laparoscopy surgery, the only way to diagnose and treat the endometriosis. When I woke up groggy, Jennifer had handed me a photograph of my uterus. The pink tissue of my ovaries clustered with endometriosis like ripening berries. She had made 3 punctures in my belly, 1 through my navel for the camera, and 2 on either side for what happened to be a pair of knitting needles, which she used to remove the endometriosis. A decade of birth control pills had suppressed it, but there it was now, not blocking my tubes, but my ovaries. The mystery hidden inside me had been revealed, and it was remedied. No one really knows what causes endometriosis and how it causes infertility. But Jennifer assured me that after the procedure, our odds would be good. For months, my underwear bore the uncertain pattern of rust-colored blood, my body healing itself, I hoped. By 3 cycles later, I still wasn't pregnant. And already I've been told that the endometriosis could be returning. After we'd been trying for a year, officially hitting the infertile mark, Jennifer referred us to a reproductive specialist who recommended Clomid and intrauterine insemination. I picked up the prescription at the pharmacy. It was too late to begin the treatment. That cycle, so one more time, 1 more 13, we gave it a try the old-fashioned way. And 3 weeks later, I woke up drooling on my pillow. Aaron smelled like mustard, and on the stick, there were 2 lines. And then on another early morning, 9.5 months later, 1 week after my due date, a cramp rocked me awake. It felt as though my uterus was being choked from the inside. Now that feels like a contraction, I thought. I sat up in bed, riveted. Had I dreamt it? 1 second later, my water broke. I gasped a Christmas morning gasp. The exciting thing about your water breaking is that you know that you're in business. I crouched on the floor next to the bed to avoid soaking, and the sheets for furthermore, and called Erin, my midwife, who was 38 weeks pregnant herself. She told me to go to the hospital. Later, Erin wouldn't remember any of the car ride, though he was the one driving. He didn't remember stopping at the bank to withdraw cash for the valet, though it was his idea. There was no valet parking at the hospital, and what man with a wife in labor stops at an ATM anyway? He has this thing when he blacks out during traumatic experiences. His brain's way of protecting itself from what it can't process, I guess. For him, birth was a trauma. It was a trauma for me too. In the most exhilarating way possible, I had been that obnoxious woman who enjoys every minute of pregnancy, including the nausea. The pain through my hips that made me feel every morning as though I'd been dropped from a great height, the burning itch of a varicose vein that bulged in my left calf. The following year, Jennifer's husband, a vascular surgeon, would remove that vein in a fierce spousal competition for the most modest scar. I was fascinated by the science experiment that was my pregnant body. And now I was fascinated by labor. I felt the waves of contractions come steady and sure. They did hurt. No wonder even Erin, a certified midwife, had gotten an epidural during her first labor. A year before, in the very hospital room in which I was now settled, she screamed, "I can't get an epidural. I'm a midwife." But she swallowed her pride and chose the pain relief. I worried that I'd get to that point myself, but I wanted an unmedicated birth badly. I wanted the full level the full level 10 experience. I breathed, I dilated, I moaned. It was hell and I was into it. Aaron, though, he was not so into it. He grows nauseous at the sight of blood. When he wakes up in the morning and is brushing his teeth and the cat takes a dump in the litter box, at just the wrong time, sometimes he will throw up in the sink. In our final childbirth preparation class, another of the dads passed out during a video featuring an epidural needle, and Aaron wasn't that queasy, but he was pretty close. Aaron and the passed out dad were the only dads who didn't attend every class. Aaron came for the first week and the last, excusing himself for the middle 4. He had a new job he couldn't miss. I missed him, but I didn't really mind. On the other nights, my mom and my friend Gina took turns standing in as my birth partner, massaging my back, and I sat on a birthing ball. My mother supported me on the gym mat, and I tried to practice a very unpretty sideways push in my skinny jeans and flats. I don't think I'll be trying that one, I said. After the class ended, Gina filled Aaron in on all he needed to know, quizzing him on the TACO acronym he had to remember if my water broke. But even this was enough to gross him out. Gina was a little grossed out too. Me? I couldn't wait to determine the time, amount, color, and odor of my amniotic fluid. So Aaron did not breathe with me in the delivery room or take time for my contractions or gave me loving music like an MP3 mix. He surfed the internet on his laptop. He handed me a cup of water between contractions. He stood at my shoulder and hid behind a camera. He cheered me on, mostly from a distance of about 2 yards. He was terrified. I guess I was a little disappointed that he wasn't more involved. Early in my pregnancy, when I pictured my labor, I imagined him holding back the meaty drumstick of my thigh, my mother holding back the other, just like I seen on all those birthing documentaries. His gloves would catch our baby and my mother would capture the whole thing on camera. Then again, the greedy part of me that looked forward to childbirth like an athlete looks forward to the big game wanted labor all to myself. I did not need a coach. I did not need a cheerleader. I did not need fans. Stand back, people. I was going to have myself a baby. So I was resigned to the fact that Aaron wasn't that kind of dad who instinctively grabs a thigh. 2 yards away was just about perfect. And the same logic determined my decision not to have my mother in the room when I delivered. I wanted to push without distraction. That didn't mean I didn't want her within close range for the early stages of labor. 2 hours after we checked into the hospital, she arrived with my sister-in-law and her newborn son. And I walked the hospital halls with them, admiring my nephew, stopping to rest and breathe when a contraction took over. I talked with them while I tried to find a comfortable spot on an inflatable birthing device shaped like a gel capsule. The baby Aaron discovered was tilted to encourage him or her into place. We still didn't know the sex. I needed to be upright. Then, when I grew restless, Aaron drew a tub full of water in the bathroom. Not a big, luxurious birthing tub, but a regular hotel tub. And I tried sitting in it for a while wearing a brown bikini top while my mother and sister-in-law waited with Aaron outside the door. While I bobbed in the water, Aaron told me the story of how her husband during the early part of her labor had filled this tub and gotten into it himself along with a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken and his BlackBerry. Maybe it was just that image that ruined the tub for me. I'd expected to find great comfort there, but instead I felt claustrophobic, a goldfish thrashing in a glass bowl. Also, because I tested positive for group B strep, I needed antibiotics, so every 20 minutes I had to be tethered to an IV pole, which the nurse rolled into the bathroom. I leaned over the edge of the tub, moaning, trying to keep the IV tube dry. The contractions were coming hard and fast now. A minute on, a minute off. On the side of the door, my mother whispered to my sister-in-law, "I think she's having another one." And I screamed, "I can totally hear you in here." Aaron suggested that it might be best if they return to the waiting room. I got out of the tub and back into the bed, but I couldn't lie down. I couldn't even sit. The instant I put pressure on my tailbone, I leaped up in pain. Is it your back? Erin asked me. It's my ass, I told her. Is it possible to have ass labor? I shed my bikini top. Even clothing was distraction. Erin paced over to the window and observed me like a spectator at one of those stage safari tours. How cool to be this close to the wildlife. But did he really want me to leap onto the roof of his car? Suddenly, I had to poop. I lumbered back into the bathroom, sitting on the toilet, and it was unbearable. After returning home from my laparoscopy against doctor's orders, I skipped the recommended stool softeners and asked my mother to make me pasta. Sometimes doctors are right. In labor, I felt like that again, that constipated for 3 days, from 3 days worth of carbohydrates. I strained, nothing. Instead, I stood up, waddled over to the sink, and threw up into it. Oh God, I felt awful. I fumbled for my toothbrush, ran it over my teeth. For God's sake, don't worry about brushing your teeth, Erin laughed. God, I have to poop, I said. My mouth full of foam. If only I could poop, I would feel so much better. Then I would be able to deliver this baby. Erin coaxed me back to the bed. I tried sitting down again, and I sprang back up. I lay on my side moaning. Then Erin raised the back of the bed to a vertical position, and I turned around and knelt on the bed, leaning over the pillows. She checked me. You don't have to poop, she said. You have to push. You're fully dilated. Oh, God, was I happy to hear that. It would be over soon. It would be over. Are you ready, she asked. I don't know, I admitted. I thought I'd be able to recognize the urge to push when it came. All I can think of is how to poop. Yes, Erin said, getting into the position. Just like that. There was no way I could lie on my back, so I continued to kneel there on the bed, naked, growling. Erin increased the pace of his pacing. He paced closer, close enough for a brave kiss on the forehead, and then another contraction was coming, and I was pushing as if taking a shit in the woods. The baby was moving down. I could feel it with each push. After a few pushes, I turned around and squatted, holding onto a bar. Erin wheeled into the room. Jennifer, my beloved OB, popped her head around the curtain just as I was moaning through a contraction. And Erin, new to the practice, still had to be observed during deliveries. I smiled and waved. Jennifer smiled and waved, then disappeared behind the curtain. I can't see hair, Erin said. I can see hair, Erin said. Oh my God, I said. Erin, do you want to see? No, thanks, he said, his voice tiny. I'm good. Eleanor, do you want to feel it? Of course I want to feel it. I wanted to feel everything. I reached my hand between my legs, and there was the warm, wet scalp. The first time I ever touched my baby. There was the head right there, but I couldn't push it out. Contraction after contraction. I tried and tried. The head remained there, crowning a little lemon wedge of scalp for half an hour. I laid down on the side, then the other. I squatted again. I pushed and pushed. With 2 fingers, Erin swept the inside of my vagina, trying to open me up as though stretching open the neck of a new sweater. You have excellent tissue, she told me, leaning over the bulk of her belly. Was that a compliment? Thanks, I said. A contraction came. They were back to back now, consuming me, and I push. I don't want to have to give you an episiotomy, not with this excellent tissue. I didn't think I could push any harder, but after that comment, I did. When the next contraction came, I rolled over into my left side, just as I practiced with my mother in birth class, and pushed with every muscle in my body. Then I could feel my baby's head moving. Here comes the ring of fire, Erin called. To this day, I can't hear the Johnny Cash song without wincing. And then one more push, and there was my baby spilling out of my body and into Erin's deft arms. It's a boy! She placed him on my chest. He cried and cried. I cried and cried. Even Erin cried. He kissed my forehead again. Helpless with awe, he took 1,000 pictures. Oh my God, we said again and again. There really was a baby in there. At 5:30 in the evening, exactly 12 hours after my water had broken in bed, our beautiful mystery had become revealed to us. A boy. After all that crowning, he had a nice bloody cone head. He had been stuck. Aaron told me with his fist pressed to his left cheeks so that I gave birth to his head and his arms at the same time. No wonder you had a hard time pushing him out. Ah, yes, said the nurse. We see that every once in a while. Always the boys, she emitted, her arms stretched over her head. They're holding their hands out for their car keys already. Dad, Aaron asked, do you want to cut the cord? Aaron took a step back as though Aaron were about to stab him with the scissors. No thanks, he said. I'm good. My mother had been listening outside the door. All my life, it seemed she had been listening, safety patiently outside the door. And then she came tumbling in. She kissed me and Aaron and the baby. This is Nicholas, I told her. Had I been a boy and my mother had been sure that I was, I would have had the same name. Nicholas was still crying. He would cry for the next hour. I thought it was an appropriate response to the experience of being born. Me, I felt as though I had just run a marathon. I felt as though I could run another marathon. My baby's naked skin pressed to mine. The Oxycontin coursed through me. I'm so happy, I told them. I'm not in labor anymore. And Nicholas, he was pretty great too. The nurse bathed and swaddled him. And by the time she handed him to Aaron, he had stopped crying. Aaron looked down at him, nervous but blissful. He sighed. It was over. The nurse battled. It was over. There was some primal stuff, my husband said to our son, shaking his head with pride. Your mom just earned some serious respect. Then Aaron's face lit up with alarm. Something's happening, he said, pushing the baby into my arms. What's happening? He's like shaking. But the baby looked fine. Aaron patted down his chest from the pocket of his flannel shirt. He withdrew his cell phone, which had been vibrating. A call from a well-wisher. He signed again. It's going to be fine, I said. 3 years after Nico was born, while he napped in the back seat, I sat parked in the driveway in our air-conditioned car, breathing through the labor of our second child. This time we knew it would be another boy. This time, labor didn't start with my water breaking, but with contractions. 3 days before my due date this time. I knew just how hard natural labor would be, but I didn't look forward to it any less. A different college town, a different cheerful midwife, a different doctor who performed, a different laparoscopy, a different whole year before we conceived. The differences were so negligible that the memories of my son's birth blend into one. The real difference was that this time Aaron was sick. 2 months before, overnight, his body had broken out into painful lesions, dime-sized wounds that wouldn't heal. Eventually, the diagnosis that would stick was prurigo nodularis, 2 words that were as useless as they were excruciating. But at that point, his doctor believed it was a staph infection and had prescribed a powerful dose of antibiotics. And Aaron had to get permission to be in the delivery room. His whole body ached. He lost 30 pounds. He was consumed by a cycle of insomnia and fatigue. He barely slept the night before, and shortly after, we settled into the hospital, into the steady rhythm of contractions in a dark room. He nodded off. Marie, my midwife, eyed him snoring softly in his armchair. She looked puzzled. I stifled the urge to tell her about what a good father he was to Nico. Would he love this child any less because he was unconscious part of his birth? A stay-at-home dad, he now spends his days wagging lightsaber battles, sanitizing sippy cups, dispensing Band-Aids, and changing diapers with an expertise that puts to shame those clueless dad diaper commercials. He couldn't love either child anymore. Instead, I just said, I'll wake him up for the good part. While he slept, he in his own private pain, I in mine, I took a shower. The warm water pondered my back. It was so much better than the bath. Every once in a while, Marie came to check in on me. I'm fine, I told her. My parents were on the way, and Nico was at home with a sitter. My husband slept in the next room, and I labored there for an hour under the falling water. I stood, I squatted, I knelt. I wasn't alone. But now solitude was an unwritten line of my birth plan, and besides, my baby was there with me. So was my grandmother, who had birthed my mother while her husband was overseas during World War II. So was my mother, who, before her C-section in Athens, wearing nothing but a shower cap, freezing on a gurney, trying to remember the Greek word for cold. They too were without their husbands, and yet none of us was alone. I think we'd never been less alone in those quiet moments before we met our babies. Henry was born just after midnight. I wouldn't see my mother until the morning. We didn't know it yet, but already cancer was growing quietly in her lungs as she drove through the night toward me. As I swayed in the shower, as Erin slept, despite her 50 years of smoking, her doctor had never ordered a chest x-ray. When Henry was 6 months old, just after gathering with all 6 of her grandsons for my father's surprise 80th birthday party, my sister-in-law was pregnant with the 7th, my mother would climb into the car for her radiation treatment and say to me and my brothers, "Goodbye, you're wonderful children." From her diagnosis to her death, 3 weeks passed. I should have asked her into the delivery room. Erin woke for the last few hours of labor, the final of which he captured on film from the respectful sight of my left elbow. A year later, his sores vanished as inexplicitly as they had appeared. Who knows at any time what mysteries are inside us? The cells and spirits conspire to shut down life or bring it forth. Sometimes modern medicine, with its X-ray vision, helps to reveal our bodies and their secrets. Sometimes it reveals them too late. Sometimes it fails us. Sometimes we get lucky and we triumph over our own bodies and we believe them capable of. I've never felt luckier than the hour after first giving birth, my hormones soaring. Nicholas bundled in my arms. During the depths of labor, I had the autonomy and privacy I'd craved. But now there was nothing sweeter than the company of my mother and my husband. The people who, with my son, had made me a mother. They were huddled together, all of us dazed with happiness. I'd almost forgotten Erin standing pregnant in the corner. In just a couple of weeks, she'd be the one with the new baby in her arms. "Get the present," I told Erin. And he handed our midwife, this woman who had sat at my side for hours, who had protected my space, who had been wrist deep in my tissue, who delivered not just a healthy baby, but the day of my dreams. A gift bag of maternity lotions and soaps, a box of mother's milk tea. "Thanks for bringing my child into the world," I joked. "I wish I could give you more." Her smile was exhausted, expectant. "I take an hour labor like yours," she said. So I closed my eyes and make a wish. And I wished it on her. Reader, I wish it on you.
And those are words beautifully written and beautifully read by a mother of 2 beautiful children. I can't thank you both enough for reading these wonderful stories and for giving people kind of an insight into what Aspen Words could be like this year. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I hope that all of you that are watching and maybe those of you that are reading will be present next month to hear the very witty words of Simon Rich, who has written for the likes of Saturday Night Live, but who now has become a father and whose words, while they are true to Saturday Night Live, have a father's beauty at the end of each story. We'll see you next month. And thank you once again to the beautiful people at Thunder River Theater. We couldn't do this without you, baby. Thank you, Sean. We'll look for you next month, okay? Bye.